Dr. Nikitin, thank you so much for coming. My name is Tracy Lyon. I'm a second semester student in the MPTS program here and a research assistant at CNS. You discussed a lot of important global issues which it would make sense for the United States and Russia to cooperate on, to tackle jointly. But my question is, if you had to choose, what would you say would be the most urgent issue to cooperate on? And alternatively, what would be the most likely or the most convenient issue to cooperate on? Thank you.
Well, most urgent definitely is Syria, Iraq, and ISIS. This combination of two campaigns, which anyway are already waged in the process of waging by Russia in Syria, by US in Iraq. We need to combine them into one joint campaign, which at the same time would help to re-establish mil-to-mil cooperation, military-to-military cooperation between two countries. And by the way, my guess is that Russia moved to Syria not only because it wanted to support Assad. It was a combination of 5 or 6 different reasons, among them yes, support Damascus government, but also to show that military reform is finished and Russia has a new generation of weapons, and detract attention from Ukraine, and to use Syria as a subject for re-establishing mil-to-mil cooperation, which was broken by Ukraine. This is why this is really urgent and at the same time realistic possibility.
Thank you.
Who else wants to jump in? Okay, Li Bao.
Hi, Dr. Sandra. I'm Li Biao from China, and something you, and also second year of MPTS program. Something you mentioned interesting.
And a Russian speaker as well.
Something interesting me is that you mentioned about this China-Russian and U.S. triangle relations. I was just curious. This quick question: in what way do you think this kind of triangle dynamic will work?
Well, you see. Russia is afraid to be ignored in this American-Chinese relations, because the easiest scenario is that China and US for another 2, 3, 5 decades would be two giants who would be balancing each other, competing, cooperating with each other, and Russia simply would not be counted. This is why Russia is trying to jump into this train of this new bipolar structure, but funny it may sound, we haven't decided yet on whose side we are more useful. Either we are good friends of China, and then it's a dramatic scenario for Americans, or we are part of the West, and then it's a dramatic scenario for China. But that's exactly as a role of balancer, so to say, which means that we would support in some projects China. And by the way, Russian-Chinese relations are good as never. I visit China constantly, and I know the situation inside China, and very positive on the level of leaders, very positive on the level of people. At the same time, we understand that we are not ready, for example, for economic integration with China, because the Chinese economy would eat us easily. And we are ready for cooperation, but not integration. And for example, regarding the nuclear balances, we also are not sure that we are ready to become part of like any kind of new military atomic projects between Russia and China, maybe not. Which means that, as I said, we are yet undecided.
Thanks. Noah, did you have your hand?
I did, yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Noah. I studied with you in Moscow, and then here I'm a part of the dual degree MPTS program. I work as a graduate research assistant here at CNS and for the Graduate Initiative in Russian Studies. So my question regards policies on separatism. You mentioned that from both sides there's very little basis for actual policy on separatism, and it's based more on strategic calculations at the time of the event, yeah? So what strategic, I'm curious, calculations were involved with not recognizing Transnistria and Karabakh, but yes, recognizing Lugansk and Donetsk? Thanks.
Yes, as I said, you must understand the logic during 25 years of new Russia after collapse of the Soviet Union. Yeltsin once pronounced on television a very interesting phrase, addressing other leaders of other republics. He said, "Eat as much sovereignty as much you can swallow." And he himself was eating sovereignty, biting it from Gorbachev. Russia was as much a separatist country, but by the way, let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that the United States of America separated from British Empire through revolution, which means that you are separatists, we are separatists. We are all are separatists at a certain moment of our history. And now we have. So in '91, Yeltsin started from the idea that separatism is normal, separatism is good. This is why we support Ossetians, Abkhazians, Transnistrians, Karabakh, everybody. But 2, 3, 4, 5 years, system becomes more rigid, war in Chechnya starts. And Yeltsin starts to think, wait a minute, if I support their separatism, they will support my separatism. And really from the territory of Georgia, which has a border with Chechnya, a lot of financial assistance and volunteers came to Chechnya. So Yeltsin changes his position 180 degrees, and he announces that, no, wait a minute, territorial integrity is a main principle. Territorial integrity of my Russia, my country, nobody could be separatist here. But then, by logic, I must support territorial integrity of Georgia, territorial integrity of Moldova, so I do not recognize Transnistria, I do not recognize Ossetia, Abkhazia. After another 10 years, situation changes again, because after the war, 5 days war between Russia and Georgia, Abkhazians themselves did the job. They purged their country out of Georgian troops, and public opinion surveys did in Russia, they showed the following correlation of opinions. 5% of people said, let's keep Ossetia and Abkhazia inside Georgia only with high level of autonomy. Approximately 15% people said, let's adopt Ossetia and Abkhazia into Russia. But majority of 50+% said, let them be independent states between Georgia and Russia. And this is how Russia recognized these two concrete states, violating some principle which itself announced earlier. So yes, there is a contradiction between our recognition of Ossetia and Abkhazia and non-recognition of Transnistria and Karabakh. In principle, we should be logical. But you gentlemen should be logical too. I mean, either you recognize separatism in Kosovo, but then please recognize separatism of Donetsk. You also have this like double standards. And this brings us back to the notion of pragmatism.
Thank you. Nikolai, I want to call upon Nikolai at some point in time because I'm sure there are a number of
I'd like
items
to
that
see
were...
students first have a chance to ask questions.
That's fine. Oleg?
Thank you, Dr. Nikitin, for your very insightful presentation. My name is Adam Ponce from the dual degree with MGIMO and MIS. And you already mentioned there are some potential issues of common ground between Russia and the US. But what about both participation within the United Nations? Do you think it could be like a proper ground to find some other coincidence, or it would be like quite the opposite?
Well, you see, there are different mechanisms of global governance. Security Council of United Nations is one mechanism, and it is very much formalized. But we also have, for example, G7 mechanism, where the presidents of US, Canada, Italy, Germany, Japan meet together and make very, very informal decisions. I remember Madeleine Albright even complains that at the G7 meeting she was forced to sing karaoke, and which shows how informal are these meetings. And from this point of view, yes, obviously we have a very good experience of normal interacting with the US within United Nations, within Security Council. And by the way, if we count how many times right of veto was used by US plus France plus UK, and on the other hand, how many times veto right was used by Soviet Union, China, and Russia, it's approximately the same, about 150 times on each hand. And which means that we both block the work of United Nations from time to time, but we both find compromises from time to time. At the same time, not all solutions, not all decisions should be pushed through United Nations. For example, during Russian-Georgian War of 2008, no one Security Council resolution was adopted. Why? Because Russia simply blocked all attempts to accuse Russia, and Russian draft was blocked by France, French draft was blocked by Russia. The same about Ukraine. We don't have any serious Security Council resolutions regarding Ukraine at all. Why? Because we are blocking technically the documents which are prepared by the other side, and we are doing this already for many years. Is it a normal and good way of interaction? Well, maybe it's not the best way, but at the same time, it's diplomacy, and I am stressing that this is not enough, that interaction only through United Nations is not the only mechanism we need. Too often it is blocked exactly in the times of crisis. We behave like Indians and Pakistanis. You know, I've been to Pakistan and they told me that each time we have a crisis with Indians, we cut the telephone line to their general staff, because how can we talk to them if they are so bad? But the problem is that exactly in the time of crisis you need this telephone line to talk between the military staffs of each other. So the same with Russia and US. We need many second track channels. And the very texture of relations should be much thicker. That's my point.
Thanks. Before I turn to Nikolai, any other students or young staff who wish to, or visitors who wish to weigh in? Nikolai, why don't you provoke us here? Go ahead.
No, I actually don't have any provocations.
Okay,
A
well,
very
pass
short
it.
comment, yes, and a very short question. I don't know if the answer to the question will be short, but that's up to you. No, the comment is, this was an excellent presentation and an excellent agenda, and unfortunately I don't think the politics inside the Beltway will allow any moves along this path, well, at least in the foreseeable future, which is sad, but unfortunately all politics is domestic, first of all, and not international. The question is I wonder how you could connect like everything that you described about Russian policy to the concept of the multipolar world that's been kind of dominating the world view for about 20 years, I would say, probably since late 90s when Primakov announced it first time. In particular, actually, regarding the United Nations Security Council, I see sort of a contradiction, conceptual contradiction, because multipolar world is normally defined as the balance of power world, right? But the Security Council really embodies the concert, so a whole different structure. So I wonder if you could discuss these broader theoretical issues.
Well, let me start from the end. Last year we did an interesting project together with German scientists. The project is exactly called Concert of Powers for the 21st Century. Mm-hmm. What we did, we entered into computer the data about approximately 25 different parameters of all 200 countries of the world, and we asked computer which nations should be in negotiations if we want to concentrate nations which have a bigger proportion of population, bigger proportion of economy, bigger proportion of arms spendings, and computer graphs showed us that we can have, for example, sets of 13 countries, 15 and 17 countries each time. 13 countries already gives us 75% of world military spendings and 80% of world economy. And many parameters are taken care if you just make political agreement between 13, 14, 15 countries, not more. And these countries include, of course, the P5, but also new arrivals like Brazil, Argentina, India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. And we publish this, and there are interesting tables where we discuss whether the situation really changes if you add to negotiations, for example, Indonesia, or then whether something changes if you add Malaysia. And we came to an understanding, and it was an international team of 25 scientists from 12 countries. We came to an understanding that on a parallel track to Security Council of United Nations, it would be very advisable to create a kind of mechanism which existed in the 19th century between the empires of the Europe, because concert of powers, the very terminology, was born during the Vienna Congress of 1815, when the British Empire and French Empire and Prussian Empire and Russian Empire and Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, they all gathered in Vienna, and for 1 year they were elaborating some rules of behavior. And Russian Tsar Alexander III himself negotiated as a diplomat almost during 1 year spent in Vienna. And they elaborated the whole system of consultations between foreign ministers, different type of consultations between czars, between emperors, third type of consultations between ministers of defense. It was done as early as the beginning of the 19th century. So now within this project, we came to an understanding that we need parallel and additional and complementary mechanisms which do not undermine Security Council, but which complement it. Because we need a parallel tracks of negotiations. If everything is blocked, we cannot take any decision about Ukraine within Security Council because Russia is constantly placing a veto. Then there should be some parallel forum somewhere, I don't know, my suggestion is on Bali, where the diplomats meet and spend 1 month together, drink together, and elaborate some suggestions. And now getting back to the reform of the United Nations, you know, Russian President Medvedev in 2009, when he was speaking in the General Assembly of United Nations, he sounded the Russian approach to reform of Security Council. He said, we, Russia, we support the idea that the composition of Security Council could be changed. Maybe India, Pakistan, maybe Brazil, maybe Argentina, maybe Indonesia, but our suggestion is this: we, Russia, we would support any consensus if it would be elaborated by other countries. Please decide, and then we will support. And you understand that this is very Jesuitic position, because Medvedev realized that never within the next 10 or 20 years, other countries would be able to agree who should be in the new composition of Security Council. Especially what should be done with the right of veto, because there are like 3 approaches. The first is at all nobody should have veto, and both Washington and Moscow and Beijing very much against it. Second approach, let's give right of veto to every of the potential 20 members of Security Council. But then you understand that everything would be blocked, because Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, somebody always would be against it. The third approach is to give right of veto on the basis of rotation. For example, for 2 years, Saudi Arabia gets the right of veto, for next 2 years, Pakistan, and so on and so forth. But all this makes the reform of United Nations very slow, not so realistic. And as I said, I rather prefer to speak about complementary mechanisms which we need to create.
Thank you, Alexander. Some other questions? Please.
My name is Jeremy Abrams. I'm a lecturer up at San Jose State University. I'm just wondering if you can comment briefly on how Russia, how Moscow is viewing American domestic politics, in particular in relation to how slow they are staffing key positions, how out of, since our Secretary of State was confirmed, how he seems to have disappeared from the worldview. Do they view this with any type of concern? Do they think this is just part of the normal transition politics? Is this an opportunity or a crisis that they might want to take advantage of?
Well, while while standing on the position that we appreciate if United States don't dig too deep into our domestic politics,
Yes.
we don't want to dig too deep into American domestic politics as well. And Putin avoids very much to comment on any domestic American matters. And at the same time, please understand that for majority of ordinary Russians, it's only an object of curiosity how the life in America is organized. But it's not a subject for political distinctions. And it's perceived like astronomical question about other civilizations which live on a far located planet. And from this point of view, we never, by the way, saw any real preferences of the Russian population, whether it is Hillary Clinton with her domestic list of proposals or Trump during the electoral campaign. Frankly, the answer is no certain position. It's the same way as there is a certain self-centrism which was characteristic for communist Moscow. We always thought that the whole world is divided between communists and anti-communists. But then we realized that this is not much important for a majority of 7 billion people living on this planet. The same here. Americans always think that all the rest of the world should be somehow taking notes and position for your small domestic differences. Looking from a side, believe me, American model is nice as it is, and we don't care how it is organized inside.
Well, can I just say a few words here? There is a very practical, I think, diplomatic challenge. To talk to someone, you need to have people on the other side. So yes, but that's more technical than political.
Thank you. If any other further questions, please, Les.
My name is Les DeWitt, and I'm with a group called Technology for Global Security in the Stanford area. So if you were going to underscore 3 initiatives or 3 projects between Russia and the United States that are working, that are best practices, what would they be?
Well, first of all, outer space station, which with the space cooperation, which has a good history of half a century, by the way, and which really demonstrates to the whole humankind that we are best technologically developed nations. Second, I would say that unrealized project of joint ABM system would be interesting. It is not on the table now, but we almost reached a stage about 5-7 years ago that it could be proposed some defensive system of anti-ballistic missile character, which could be a joint Russian-Western system. And the third one, probably we need to do something regarding the internet and world information flows. I mean that currently it is China who showed both of us that they want politically regulate internet. But then we found that the United States introduced law after law, and your level of regulation of internet is now higher than ours. And we need somehow to interface between how we deal with the freedom of information in this world, where both you and us and China, everybody is trying to regulate internet, the global infosphere, if you wish. So this I would call like 3 areas where we can and should.
Did you want to suggest any alternative to your own question?
No, I think I'm listening. I'm just trying to learn. But there has to be different ways. Let's see, I'm trying to look at your words. You said parallel tracks of diplomacy, parallel tracks of joint ventures working together, common interests. There has to be a whole slew of items and things that could be done. And I was just trying to see, what your mind was.
Well, you see, simply I come from like humanitarian sphere, but I, with all my respect, I can list a lot of technological issues where we already have a good reserve of cooperation. And for example, now this new technologies of dealing with non-conventional oil and gas. That's extremely important for Russia because it brings both you and us into a new universe. You have a lot of oil, as we found, under the surface of United States, and we have a lot of oil which is extracted on two different ways. And even under Germany and Poland, there is a huge oil field, and China is now asking how to reverse the pipelines which bring in oil to China in opposite direction, because they start to extract oil which before technologically they were not able to extract. So it looks like even this small sphere of extracting oil and gas is a huge area for cooperation, but it could be also a huge area for competition.
It's interesting, Les. We had Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in Monterey in late November, and without being asked the question, one of the things that he volunteered was that it would make a great deal of sense to revive some 24 or so working groups that had been established in the past to examine a host of issues, many of which we've talked about now, but many others as well. Whether you're talking about kind of high-tech terrorism, non-proliferation, climate change, trade, possibly the Arctic. I'm not sure if that was included in the list there. And one would have hoped that in the exchanges, between Mr. Kislyak and some of the president's former advisors and current advisors, that perhaps that suggestion would have been made, because it would provide a framework for discussing many of the things which I think merit discussion. Those working groups were suspended; they were not canceled. After the action in Ukraine and Crimea, and so I think we're going to put those back into place. You would have a mechanism which would build upon past exchanges that would be very, very helpful. So that would be my response.
Just one phrase to add: such exchanges, such cooperation should not be dependable upon ideological atmosphere. So they should not be broken every time when two presidents don't talk to each other.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Nikitin. I think this was really a fascinating discussion, and I think we'll see much more of this, in part due to the cooperation that we have now in Monterey with MGIMO, and we look forward to our students also partaking in these kinds of seminars in both Moscow and Monterey. So please join me in thanking Professor Nikitin.